The stock of Jazz Pharmaceuticals PLC, ticker JAZZ, is currently trading at $141.07, reflecting an intraday movement that saw it essentially flat for the session, having closed the prior trading day at $141.07 on November 14, 2025. This closing price is what we have to work with today, November 17, 2025, since live trading is not currently ongoing. This kind of negligible daily movement, however, often masks the huge swings in sentiment that are constantly brewing under the surface for a volatile biotech name, and for Jazz, the volatility has been explosive in the last week. The real story here isn't the minor oscillation you see on the screen now, but the massive, unexpected tailwind that just hit the oncology side of their business, which most retail investors and even some institutional watchers have been downplaying. Just hours ago, Jazz announced incredibly strong, positive top-line results from their Phase 3 Horizon GEA-01 trial for their cancer drug, Ziihera. The study, focusing on Ziihera as a first-line treatment for an aggressive type of gastroesophageal cancer, showed statistically significant and clinically meaningful improvements in progression-free survival when used with chemotherapy. This is huge, but even more so is the mention that Ziihera, combined with chemotherapy and a checkpoint inhibitor, demonstrated a significant improvement in overall survival. Now, if you're following the standard market narrative, you likely think of Jazz primarily as a sleep disorder company. You know them for XWAV and its predecessor, Ziihera, which treat narcolepsy and other sleep-related conditions. This narrative has been the fundamental anchor for the stock for years, giving it a stable but somewhat limited valuation ceiling. The expectation has always been that revenue growth would be driven by the slow, steady transition of patients from the older, soon-to-be generics-facing Ziihera to the low-sodium, patented XWAV, along with the continued expansion of their seizure drug, Epidiolex, which has also been a reliable growth engine in their neuroscience franchise. That's the common ground, the widely held belief: Jazz is a neuroscience play. The reality, however, which this latest clinical data dramatically highlights, is that their oncology pipeline, which has historically been seen as a secondary, higher-risk growth driver, is now delivering results that could fundamentally shift the company's revenue mix and valuation multiple. This isn't just a minor pipeline win. These are the kind of data points that lead to new standards of care in major cancer indications, which is an immediate game-changer for long-term revenue projections, especially in a field where pricing power is significant. This positive news follows a mixed reaction to their latest third-quarter earnings report, which came out just over a week ago. On the surface, the numbers were an absolute beat. Non-GAAP earnings per share came in at $8.13, absolutely crushing the consensus forecast of $5.93, a 37% surprise. Revenue also slightly exceeded expectations at $1.13 billion. Yet despite this massive beat on the bottom line, the stock barely budged in after-hours trading, even seeing a slight dip initially. This is where the tension between expectation and reality was most apparent. The market was so focused on the future, specifically the looming generic competition for the legacy Ziihera and the overall growth trajectory of the core sleep franchise, that the excellent current quarter performance was discounted. Management had narrowed their full-year revenue guidance to a range of $4.175 billion to $4.275 billion, and while this reflected confidence, the slight adjustment and the general concerns about patent cliffs seemed to overshadow the profitability win. Now, the Ziihera data throws a wrench into that cautious sentiment. The trading volume and price action over the next few days, once the market opens, will be crucial. We are likely to see massive institutional flows as portfolio managers who categorize Jazz as a neuroscience stock are forced to reevaluate it as a rapidly ascending oncology and rare disease company. The volume spikes preceding the weekend and the current after-hours trading hints at this coming re-rating. We saw a similar dynamic recently, though on a smaller scale, when the broader market experienced a rotation out of high-flying names like Nvidia stock and back into value-oriented biotechs. Jazz benefited slightly from that flow, but the fundamental product-driven catalyst of Ziihera is far more impactful than a mere sector rotation. This is the difference between catching a current and igniting an engine. The context of this oncology win needs to be framed against the backdrop of the entire biopharma sector. We've seen a lot of volatility, but also some spectacular gains driven by clinical trial success, especially in oncology. For an individual brokerage investor using self-investing tools, whether they are on Robinhood stock trading or a more advanced platform like Interactive Brokers Trading, understanding the nuances of drug development is key to translating clinical success into stock price action. This is not like looking at the iPhone sales growth for Apple stock or the latest GPU shipments for Nvidia stock. This is about the market potential that is still years away from full realization. The common pitfall is to evaluate Jazz solely on its current revenue drivers, which is what the market did post-earnings. The key revenue generators, XWAV and Epidiolex, are performing well, growing by 11% and 20% year-over-year, respectively, in the third quarter. XWAV's patient count is growing steadily, demonstrating a successful switch strategy, and Epidiolex is on track to become a blockbuster. This robust foundation is what allows the company to invest heavily in its pipeline. But the valuation is often constrained by the replacement revenue narrative, the idea that XWAV is merely replacing Xyrem revenue rather than providing net new growth over the long term, especially once generics for Xyrem arrive. This expectation of stagnation in the core franchise is what the Ziihera news directly challenges. A successful launch and widespread uptake of Ziihera in gastroesophageal cancer could provide a third, massive leg of growth, completely independent of the sleep market, which is a massive de-risking event for the company's future revenue stream. The successful integration and progress of pipeline assets like this are critical for a biopharma company's long-term health and is often where the real value lies, a lesson that holders of SoFi Invest or those who utilize Schwab Intelligent Portfolios for diversification across industries should pay close attention to. To appreciate the importance of Ziihera, you have to look deeper into Jazz Pharmaceuticals' operating structure. The company is, at its heart, a specialty pharmaceutical firm focused on acquiring, developing, and commercializing differentiated therapies, primarily in two key therapeutic areas: neuroscience, sleep disorders and epilepsy, and oncology. The neuroscience franchise is the cash cow. XWAV, as mentioned, is the low-sodium successor to Xyrem, which treats excessive daytime sleepiness and cataplexy in patients with narcolepsy and also has an indication for idiopathic hypersomnia. The shift to XWAV is strategic, designed to mitigate the effect of the generic entry for Xyrem, a classic life cycle management strategy in pharma. Epidiolex, another key neuroscience product, is a cannabidiol oral solution approved for specific seizure types. It was acquired via the buyout of GW Pharmaceuticals, demonstrating Jazz's appetite for smart, accretive acquisitions. On the oncology side, their marketed products include Zepzelca for small cell lung cancer and Rylez for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. These products, while successful, are in smaller markets than what the new Ziihera data promises. The company's historical performance has been characterized by aggressive M&A activity to build out a portfolio that can weather patent cliffs and provide sustainable long-term cash flow. This strategy, while successful in generating cash, often comes with significant acquired in-process research and development (IPRD) expenses, which can complicate GAAP earnings and sometimes make the stock look less appealing on traditional PE multiples. Investors therefore must look at the adjusted non-GAAP figures and focus intensely on product sales growth. This complex financial picture is why many individual investors may prefer to use sophisticated platforms like Fidelity or Fidelity Investments, which offer detailed research and tools to navigate these reports, or even rely on the streamlined approach of an intelligent portfolio to manage sector-specific risks. The true expectation versus reality moment is how the market values pipeline risk. The initial market disappointment post-earnings was the expectation that the patent uncertainty and the high cost of maintaining a diversified pipeline would continue to be a headwind, essentially capping the share price. The reality is that the potential upside from Ziihera is a non-linear event. It doesn't just add incremental revenue, it fundamentally changes the perception of Jazz's internal R&D and acquisition capabilities in oncology. It elevates their status in the biopharma landscape. If Ziihera gains approval and is successfully commercialized, it could become a multi-billion-dollar asset, dwarfing the revenue generated by the legacy Xyrem franchise. This is the core reason for the imminent bullish re-rating. When you analyze institutional activity, you look for signs of conviction. The high trading volume in the past month, even on down days, suggests significant cross-currents, some funds reducing exposure due to generic fears, while others are quietly building positions in anticipation of a pipeline catalyst, just like this one. It's a clash between those focused on the rearview mirror and those looking through the windshield. Looking forward, the future outlook for Jazz Pharmaceuticals is now distinctly tied to two things: execution on the XWAV switch and the successful progression of Ziihera. For XWAV, the main risk is not competition, as the patient transition seems successful, but rather payer pushback or any unforeseen issues with the supply chain or patient adherence, which are always present in the rare disease space. On the oncology side, while the Phase 3 results are overwhelmingly positive, the timeline to full regulatory approval and commercial launch is the next hurdle. The market will now be scrutinizing every piece of data, every presentation, and every regulatory filing related to Ziihera. A smoother-than-expected path to market could easily push the stock towards the high end of analyst price targets, some of which are already in the $217 to $230 range,